COVID-19 has brought about unprecedented human and humanitarian challenges. Countries, communities, economies, and workplaces have all been impacted differently, and we are still to fully realize the extent of this particular impact. Most companies around the world have risen to the occasion, acting swiftly to safeguard employees and migrate to a new way of working that even the most extreme business continuity plans hadn't envisioned. This is also true of the CSR programs, for which there has never been a greater need than today. Over the past few months, CSR leaders have reimagined and redefined their strategies. Let's learn how. Today's conversation is brought to you by the National CSR Network as part of our Heal with Hope at NCSR project, whereby we bring to you stories, inspiring stories of how to look beyond the tough times we face today and how leaders have redefined the strategies to keep the show going on. The National CSR Network is an initiative of the Strategic CSR Alliance comprising of industry professionals to assist companies in India to drive their CSR agenda with measurable impact and facilitate implementation of social and environmental development projects. Today, I have great pleasure in presenting Mr. Saurabh Singh, President of ICICI Foundation for Inclusive Growth. In his role, Mr. Singh is responsible for ensuring that the activities of the foundation are executed as per the directions of the Governing Council. Over the past few years, the foundation has been primarily focused on skill development and sustainable livelihood as its key initiative, with an objective of creating direct impact on the lives of beneficiaries. Mr. Singh implements the vision of ICICI Group through steering the activities of the ICICI Foundation and driving integration with ICICI Bank. He has been instrumental in developing an integrated model for rural livelihood, exploring new markets, as well as fostering key partnerships for market development for the beneficiaries in rural India. Besides his role at ICICI Foundation, Mr. Singh is the business head for trusts, associations, societies, and clubs, and the institutional banking group at ICICI Bank. He has driven key HR and customer service practices at ICICI Bank in his previous roles. He has been instrumental in various industry firsts and award winning initiatives like Smart Vault. Mr. Singh, we are very pleased to have you with us today. Can you kindly share the journey of the ICICI Foundation towards its current foundation focus on inclusive growth?
Thank you for this opportunity to share what the brand ICICI thinks about CSR. I've worked with this group for about 20 years now, and the way I see it, the parent organization ICICI was founded as a development finance institution. The core objective was development, and it continues to hold the entire thread together, whatever strategy of the organization. So there have been a whole lot of development activities for last 4 5 decades, and the evidence of those activities are very much present, where even several institutions like National Stock Exchange or even HDFC was conceptualized within the premises of ICICI. So people at ICICI have always been development oriented, and finance being the field of specialization, people have been able to combine the two. And there are several examples of CSR activity being performed prior to the act came. The ICICI Foundation itself was registered in 2008. So most of the things that ICICI has been doing is all prior to the legislation. So as a group, ICICI has been dedicated to uh, development and social sector development. And I think the primary objective has been to look at the economic value chains, identify gaps, and wherever gaps are there, you can put place capital, you can build institutions, you can do it yourself or do it with partners. But yes, today we are very proud to say that there are several institutions have been invested in, in terms of time, in terms of money, in terms of people, and have been created, which really acts as a catalyst to Indian economy.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Singh. So could you share some examples of the projects that you're doing today?
See, currently what we are doing is we are focused on two areas. One is urban livelihood, the other is rural livelihood. And strategically, the two are very different. When we speak of urban livelihood, uh, we primarily look at wage employment. So there is a population in India which finds it difficult to seek employment. And on the other side, there are a whole lot of employers who find it very difficult to seek employees. So that's where we decided that yes, can we act as a finishing school? And we set up 26 such schools as of now. And we train 30,000 youth who are unemployed, who cannot afford formal education. So they are school dropouts, they are college dropouts, and plus there are a few graduates. And we are able to successfully get them jobs. So one objective is that everyone who's been trained by us should have a offer letter before they leave the campus. So that's something which we have been able to successfully do for the last 6 years. Now, if I speak about the rural side, uh, India has 600,000 villages, so it's really vast. Every area you want to touch, whether it's education, it's healthcare, uh, it's rural infrastructure, it's rural water, rural health and sanitation. Anything you touch, there is a need in the country. So we said it's very important to decide what we want to do. So we decided that we'll work on rural livelihood, and we also made it thematic. So when I say thematic, we have picked up protein as one of the themes. Now, as per capita income grows in any country, the food plate changes from primarily being carbohydrates to a mix of carbs and proteins to a high protein diet. That's what we have seen internationally, seen around us. So, very likely that as per capita income grows in India, the cost of protein will keep going up because if the supply does not keep pace, and we have seen in the past that price of pulses has shot through the roof, and there was a problem, and India is importing pulses. So a lot of protein which is consumed in India is also being imported. So if you work with the farmers, the rural community, any anything to do with protein, it does very well. You don't have to search for the market. The market exists, and whatever the farmer is able to produce is sold. So whether it's goatry, poultry, fishery, or veg proteins, everything, the market is growing. So that's why we picked up protein as a theme. Then we have looked at what are the rural shortages. So whichever villages we are working, we try and do a study, check out what is the shortage in this particular area. We try and see how we can plug some viable agriculture activity so that those particular vegetables or particular grains can be produced locally. So that's another area. In some places, there is excess production which is supposed to go to the market. Now, wherever there is excess production, you need a proper supply chain, and part of the supply chain, some part of processing is important, some part of storage methodologies are important, transportation methodology is important. So we try and work with the entire value chain that the product reaches the marketplace with minimum losses and the farmers are able to get a better price for it. If some amount of processing can be done, we have set up various small scale rural processing centers for many produce like custard apple pulp, jamun pulp in rural areas, which are getting sold directly from those areas. Another interesting area we have picked up is environment, and we are looking at environmental issues which exist around us and how to convert some of these environmental issues into a viable livelihood alternative. So I can take examples of, let's say there are villages on the periphery of tiger reserves. Now, typically these villages have a human-animal conflict because if they grow anything in the farm, the deers will come in. They cannot get into the forest because forest is infested with carnivorous animals. So there's always a conflict in these areas. So are there particular crops? Are there particular professions? Let's say a fishery, beekeeping, uh, even some amount of secured goat rearing. These are additional income methods by which dwellers staying close to forest areas can enhance their income because crop is always at a risk of being destroyed by wild animals. So that's how we think, and that's how we identify a project. So at any point of time, we'll have hundreds of projects running across the country, and all with a sole objective that the rural population should start making cash income over and above whatever they have been making so far.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. I think those are very good examples of projects, and it's very good to see that you have a very different strategy for urban areas and rural areas. Personally, for me, I heard the first time about your insight on protein, and it's not something that is very apparent. But like as I heard you say, it makes so much sense actually for the so as you kind of grow, your lifestyle increases as you improve in economy, then you also start taking more protein. Okay, that's good. And also from a rural perspective, I think it's quite interesting what you said, which is to really help the farmers really build something up beyond and make it very relevant to the problems that they face today. I think those are very good examples. So now, given that you had, the entire world has been experiencing this lockdown for a few months and just emerging, how did you see this impact the work that you were doing, either in urban areas or rural areas? And did you really have did you feel that you needed to change some of the strategies, some of the plans as you continued to work on these projects?
Yes, I think one of the biggest learning has been that technology has been existing around us, and we have not made adequate use of technology that existed. So the first example is a urban livelihood program where we are training people in classrooms, and that had its own advantages and disadvantages. Advantage was that it was a controlled environment. Disadvantage was that only people in a radius of 7 to 8 kilometers could access the physical training institute. While it is free, but still people could not access it. Now, post COVID, we have gone into certain hybrid models and certain pure digital models. And both models are extremely interesting. So I'll give an example of a hybrid model. So let's say we are training people on air conditioning. So we have our labs where the entire training was being done, and post that placement activity was happening. Now we have tied up with the AC service uh, dealers, AC service franchisees to act as our labs and act as our tutors. And we are uh, entire curriculum is digital, and the entire practical is happening at a dealer's place. And the combination of the two is working out wonderfully well because the franchisees are seeing people working on their premises and are experiencing those people. They've handheld them, and in most cases, they want to keep them back. They don't want to offer them to the market for employment. Now, that's one model. The other model is purely digital. And purely digital, we realized that the constraint we had that we are only 26 centers and we were accessible only to people around the centers. Suddenly going digital, we are accessible to the entire country. So now we are looking at how we can have digital programs from certain studios and run it for curriculums which are digitally viable. So there are curriculums where a selling skill or even office administration we are able to impart digitally. Those programs we are running digitally, we are running digital placement programs, and people are getting employed. It's absolutely win-win right now. So that was a major learning as far as urban areas were concerned, because that's where we were in skilling domain. When I speak of rural India, the biggest thing which happened was supply chain disruption. And when I say supply chain, there are small supply chains of rural produce being moved to the closest urban market where grading sorting happens and consolidation happens, then it moves to bigger markets. Now, because everything was unorganized, everything was dependent on individual entrepreneurs. Somewhere in the entire value chain, there were some pockets where people decided to stay at home. So even if one person decides to stay at home, that value chain is getting disrupted. On the contrary, the value chains of the large e-commerce players was booming, and they had a booming business because they did not face disruptions because they were structured. So that's why we realized that rural India needs semi-structured value chains which do not get disrupted by calamity. And we have started work in that direction because that's when the ability of rural India to withstand the next calamity or the third calamity will be far higher in all the areas where we are working. Now, there are e-commerce platforms with whom we can connect the farmers. The laws in the country have changed now. Farmers can directly sell their produce, but a farmer will remain within the village. So someone has to assist the farmer in creating that value chain where the farmer gets better value for the product, and the urban consumers also pay lesser for the product. In this entire value chain, what we have realized that farmers lost and the urban consumers lost. So money was flowing out somewhere in between. That has been a biggest learning for us. So we started work on the rural value chains, and we are seeing that in the next few months how we can develop it much better.
Okay, I think that's very interesting. Like Mr. Singh, that you're talking about. So, when you see this disruption that has happened in the supply chain, just to pick up on that, do you see that continue? Like post the lockdown, because a lot of the organizations, they are feeling that the new normal is going to stay because we are never really going to come back to the way we were in the early part of the year. So, how do you see this disruption? I mean, did you see this disruption continue, and then in that case, how will that really impact the programs that you do, and what learnings do you really pick up from there?
See, the way I see it, that this has been a learning, and learnings are never lost. So, whatever challenges have come up, we could see solutions using technology. And I don't think so we should say that the rural people are technology illiterate, because the best example is banking. When government of India introduced the Jandhan account, everyone has a bank account, and yet people don't go to the bank branch. They're using the debit card with ATM. And if you actually move around in rural India, they refer to bank account as card. So that's the new word which has come. So what we have seen is that everyone wants to adapt whatever new technology is available, and if it's available at a price which is effective, and that's where our role comes in, how we can make things effective, cost effective for the rural population, and continue to bring in efficiency. The what we call middlemen, they will always exist because there is a role they are playing. The farmers will exist, the middlemen will exist, the consumers will exist, but this entire value chain has to be made slightly more efficient so that the money generated by efficiency will be a higher spread for the farmers, for the middlemen, and a discounted price for the consumers. That's how we are looking at it in the long run.
Okay. I think that's very good because this could actually lead to a very fundamental shift in the supply chain where everybody gets benefited, right? From the farmers to the end consumers like ourselves. I think so. It's really that the work and the impact that you are doing in terms of the ICSA Foundation is having a much more like a wider impact to society because you're fundamentally changing the way things get done. I think those are great examples. So within this, Mr. Singh, are there any inspiring stories that comes to your mind? Because I know that many of the times, it's so much more fulfilling when you see that the CSR initiatives, the work that you do, actually impacts, say, the lives of some people or some families. So is there anything in particular that you found touching that you'd like to share with the viewers?
If we have to talk of stories, there are hundreds of them. And even while we speak, there'll be stories being created by some employee of the foundation somewhere in the country. Now, that's where we feel happy that a few families would be thankful to the brand ICICI and not just look at it as a lender, but also look at it as being responsible to the society. And if I have to take examples, I mean, we have hundreds of examples where we have converted banana plants, waste of banana plants, into baskets, and it's being sold to IKEA, and it's full-fledged institutionalized somewhere near Madurai. Then we have a wonderful example of forest produce. In Udaipur district, there's a lot of custard apple being produced in the forest. We've trained the local women how to prune the custard apple trees in the forest. The forest department has given permission to the local villagers to pluck custard apple and sell it in the market. We have tied up with local entrepreneurs where, with the help of women, the pulp is being extracted and the pulp is being sold in the local market. And you would have eaten custard apple ice cream. Now, Udaipur being a forest, the custard apple of Udaipur being forest produced is very high on fiber content. So that's one of the best quality available for ice cream industry.
All right. So thanks, Mr. Sarva. I think that's been really inspiring. I'm sure that our viewers have benefited a lot from sharing your experiences, not only in terms of the work that the foundation does, but also in terms of how you have really shaped some of the strategies as you move forward in terms of using technology, creating digital education, and also looking at like how do you really look at supply chain and be the positive change. So thank you so much for joining, and I would really wish you all the very best as you continue the work that you do with the ICICI Foundation. Dear viewers, thank you so much for joining us today. So hope you did find the conversation with Mr. Singh inspiring and useful as you drive CSR initiatives for your organization. If you would like to share your feedback or suggestions or would like to know more about the National CSR Network, please do visit our website. You can also view our conversations with other CSR leaders and our YouTube channel. Please do share your comments. We would love to hear from you. And in the meantime, thank you, and please stay safe and well.